Good afternoon. In today's class, we will be discussing Coleridge's celebrated poem Kubla Khan. Coleridge's Kubla Khan is often considered as a quintessentially romantic poem, and the poem's intrigue is intensified, as we know, perhaps, by Coleridge's note to its background. The note goes on to ascribe composition of the poem to the summer of 1797 in a lonely farmhouse, as Coleridge says, between Porlock and Lincoln, on the Exmoor confines of Somerset and Devonshire, where the author had retired on account of ill health, and where he perhaps fell asleep from the effects of an anodyne. While reading the account in Purchas's Pilgrimage of the construction of a palace and surrounding gardens by the Mongol ruler Kubla Khan, who ruled most of Mongolia and China in the 13th century. Coleridge says that after that he had a profound sleep, at least of the external senses, that is what he claims, lasting about 3 hours, during which the poet had the most vivid confidence that he could not have composed less than from 200 to 300 lines of poetry. Upon awakening, he wrote down the 54 lines of the poem that we have, whereupon he was interrupted by a person on business from Porlock, with the result that he was never able to remember the rest of the poem. How far this account of the genesis of the poem is actually true can be called into question with the discovery in 1934 of the Crewe manuscript of the poem in Coleridge's own handwriting, in which there are minor but significant variations and corrections from the published version, and its independent account of how the poem came to be written freed criticism once and for all from the belief in the 1816 piece of prefatory note, which we are now beginning to realize is more often than not an imaginative adjunct to a poem which was perhaps added later in much the same way as Coleridge added a prose glossary to the Ancient Mariner in the publication of the poem in the collection Sibylline Leaves. Be that as it may, the basic romantic approach to this poem would be that if Kubla's aim was to impose a rational order upon nature and to wall out all the intractable and irrational elements, he has neither chosen nor built very well. Rather, the poem emphasizes the fusion of opposites within both the natural and human orders, and the poem, with its landscape of the pleasure garden, is wholly romantic in conception. Most critics have recognized that the poem is about the nature and process of poetic composition. A few have recognized that it is also about the nature of divine creativity. What remains to be accomplished is the synthesizing of these two values and views that will correspond to the synthesis of the poem itself. Central to this attempt at the synthesis is the status of Xanadu in the poem. Clearly, Xanadu is a symbol of harmonious human activity. The sacred river is a sacred given condition of human life. By using it rightly, by building on its bank, by diverting its water into sinuous rills, Kubla achieves his perfect state of balanced living. The pleasure dome therefore can be interpreted as an imaginative statement of the abundant life in the universe, which begins and ends in a mystery touched perhaps with dread, but it is a statement of this life as the ground of ideal human activity. Since perfect state of existence and composition presumably means just that, the implication of this argument is that Kubla Khan in the poem inhabits a real paradise, one in which the conjunction of heaven and earth is realized. Extended to creativity and poetic creation, this is a vision of ideal human life to the best extent that poetic imagination can create it. The first 36 lines of the poem sustains most of its poetic force through contraries and opposites. All the opposites of human and divine nature are given free scope and are reconciled into a unity which is aptly symbolized by the climactic vision of the sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice. Among the opposites which are reconciled in the poem are the infinite and the finite. For example, caverns measureless to man and twice 5 miles. Darkness and light, symbolized so significantly in sunless sea and reference to sunny spots of greenery. Nature untamed and nature improved, highlighted for example in references to forests and gardens. Savagery and sanctity, highlighted in the words, a savage place as holy and enchanted. Destruction and fertility, highlighted in huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail or chaffy grain beneath the thresher's flail. Life and death, through wood and dale the sacred river ran, then sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. Energies which elsewhere, after the fall, would appear as dangerous and demonic, here are harmoniously integrated into the total design of the work, total thematic design as it were of the work. In short, these lines give us effectively Coleridge's marriage of heaven and hell, in which, as in Blake's The Tiger, we confront the mysteries of creation. The poem as a narrative, frankly speaking, can go no further than this, for the destruction is implied of Kubla's elaborate and artificial landscape. The complex order and equilibrium of his existence are overset by the mere hint. The statement implies, of course, that the pattern must not within the poem be broken, and that Kubla is never to emerge from the walled pleasure grounds. Yet, in an important sense, the pattern is broken in that Coleridge continues the lyric but abandons the story. Suddenly the imagery shifts, we see, to the damsel with a dulcimer. This damsel apparently is an Abyssinian maid, is most simply comparable to the muse invoked by the classical poet. She has, as has been suggested, a relation to Milton's heavenly muse Urania, as the stimulating speculations about the source of Mount Tabora indicate. Appropriately, however, to Coleridge's romanticism and to the special context of this particular poem, Kubla Khan, she is wild and remote, with the glamour and terror of a far-off, mysterious land, marvelous, inaccessible, yet rich with the significant associations of literature. The damsel is, as well as the ideal singer, effectively the archetypal poet. The transmission of a song, if there can be a transmission, would be like the conception of imitation, for example, in Longinus, where the divine fire passes, according to Longinus, from poet to poet, and in much the same way in which Plato emulates Homer in the beneficent rivalry of genius. But Coleridge is modest, with a clear sense that the song can never be equaled, and he famously says, "Could I revive within me her symphony and song, to such a deep delight 'twould win me, that with music loud and long I would build that dome in air." In the truest sense, Kubla Khan can be considered as a complete work, in that it symbolizes and comprehends the crucial romantic dilemma, the permanency of the impermanent, and the possibility of the impossible. In a more obvious sense, it is clearly unfinished. As a narrative, it barely commences, and it shifts abruptly with Abyssinian made from objective to subjective. Considered as a lyric, however, it can be considered to be self-contained and a whole. The romantic poet, as idealist and monist, strives to include within his cosmos both actual and ideal, as in Coleridge, Wordsworth, Shelley, even Byron, and to some extent Keats in his later odes. For Coleridge, this tension and conflict can be reconciled and rendered valuable partly by the poet's own belief in the value of the attempt itself. The poet excels himself, as it were, by force. He is stimulated to creation rather than falling into despair. Above all, he benefits by understanding and accepting his dilemma, even while trying to rise above it nonetheless. So this is a very brief preview that I had to give you on Coleridge's Kubla Khan. In a subsequent class, we'll be going to the text in detail. Thank you.